Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking through some player props I like over on Prizepicks for the Week 3 college football slate that's coming up on Saturday. Now, I'm recording this video on Friday afternoon. We do actually have a few college football games on Friday, but I decided not to make a video for the Friday games. I didn't really see a ton of props I liked for the Friday games, so we're going to be just focusing on the games on Saturday. That's obviously when we have kind of a full slate, and I've got 4 props that I like for Saturday that we're going to talk about and share in this video. So before we talk through these 4 plays, guys, as always, if you do enjoy these Prizepicks videos and if they do help you out, make sure to hit that like button down below. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. And also, if you are new to Prizepicks and if you don't have a Prizepicks account, be sure to sign up. Use promo code NOAH when you sign up for Prizepicks with my promo code and place your first lineup. Whether you win or lose that lineup, you will instantly get $50 in promo funds added to your account. So play a $5 lineup. Doesn't matter if you win or lose that lineup. Prizepicks is going to give you an additional $50 in promo funds added to your account that you can then use towards additional lineups. You only get that promotion if you sign up and use code NOAH. So check out Prizepicks if you guys have not yet. But yeah, we got 4 picks for week 3 of the college football season, guys. Recapping last week, it was a brutal week for me last week for college football. We had a pretty good week 1, but week 2 was a disaster. I went 0-3 on the 3 picks I gave out last week. I think I gave out 3 lineups on Patreon. All 3 of those missed as well. So week 2 was definitely a week to forget for me for college football, but we're back for week 3, guys, and let's talk through the props I'm liking for this week 3 slate. So the first 2 props that we're going to talk about that I like are actually going to be kind of a correlated stack. So we're going to take a look at Brady Cook. We're going to take Brady Cook for more than 265.5 pass yards, and we're going to pair that with Luther Burden. We're going to take Luther Burden for more than 72.5 receiving yards. So these 2 props obviously correlate. Every yard that Brady Cook throws, or excuse me, every yard that Luther Burden gets is most likely going to be coming from Brady Cook, unless Brady Cook gets injured or something, which obviously we hope that doesn't happen. So pretty much if Luther Burden gets 73 yards, you can expect Brady Cook to have 73 yards as well, minimum. And then obviously whatever yards he gets to other receivers, those would add up too. But if you look at Missouri so far this season, they have kind of had a weird start to the season. So their first 2 games have both been huge wins. They beat Murray State 51-0 in week 1. And then last week against Buffalo, they beat Buffalo 38-0. So the first 2 games to start the season have been just massive blowouts where Missouri really didn't have to put their foot on the gas pedal. They were actually able to take their starters out of the game early in both of those games. And if you look, both Brady Cook and Luther Burden have gone under these lines both of their both their games this season. But Cook again hasn't really been able to, or really hasn't had to throw the ball a ton because Missouri has just won easily the 2 games they played. Also, if you look at for Luther Burden, obviously week 1 against Murray State, massive blowout. Well, actually last week against Buffalo, Luther Burden left that game early with an illness. Doesn't look like that illness is gonna limit him this week, so he should be full go this week. But last week, Luther Burden didn't even get to play the full game because he had an illness and he had to leave the game early. Like, you can look at his game log; it's not very pretty. He only had 15 yards last week, but again, had to leave the game early. And then against Murray State, only had 39 yards, but that was a massive blowout. Brady Cook only threw the ball 31 times, which is very few pass attempts for him. Like Missouri, they're a pass-heavy offense. Typically, in competitive games, Brady Cook throws the ball like 35, 40 times. So I'm expecting a more competitive game this week against Boston College. This game actually has just a 14.5-point spread. Now, sure, Missouri is still favored by 2 touchdowns, but the spread isn't so wide in this game that we should expect Missouri to just be able to run the clock out and pull their starters out of the game. This game should at least be competitive enough to where Missouri has to keep their guys in the game for the whole game. So I'm expecting more pass attempts this week for Brady Cook. And when Brady Cook throws the ball more, you should see a lot more of those targets going to Luther Burden. Luther Burden was projected to be one of the best receivers in college football this year. He's obviously kind of had a slow start to the season, but this definitely feels like a good opportunity to buy low on Luther Burden. If you look at his game log last season, Luther Burden had like 7 games last season with over 100 yards. He had 96, 117, 114, 177, 140, 149, had 97, 158. Like, he had a bunch of huge games last year. And if you actually look at his game log last year and compare it to Brady Cook's game log, a lot of the games where Luther Burden went under this receiving yards line last season were also games where Brady Cook struggled as well and didn't throw many yards. Well, for Saturday against Boston College, Brady Cook's pass yards prop is 265.5. If you look at last season and look at games where Brady Cook threw the ball, threw at least like 250 yards, there was, I believe, 6 games. So 6 games last season, Brady Cook threw for at least 250 yards. And in those 6 games, you saw Luther Burden have 117, 114, 177, 140, and then I think, 149. And then against Tennessee, he did have 275 pass yards in that game. Luther Burden only had 26 yards. But then against Florida the next week, 331 pass yards for Cook and 158 yards for Luther Burden. So you kind of compare the two guys last season. When Brady Cook would throw the ball for 250, 300 yards, that usually meant Luther Burden was getting 80, 90, 100 yards. If the books are going to project Brady Cook for 265.5 pass yards this week, I think if Brady Cook goes over that line and throws for 266 yards or more, there's a very good chance you're also seeing Luther Burden go over his receiving yards line of 72.5. Again, I know both these guys have kind of gotten off to a slow start this season, but I'm really liking a buy low spot here on Missouri. This is definitely a game against Boston College that should be competitive enough to where Missouri has to keep their foot on the gas pedal. They have to keep their starters in the game for the whole game. And if that's the case, I like both these guys to go over these two lines. And again, these two props do correlate so that, most likely scenario, if Cook throws for 266 yards or more, Luther Burden is also getting 73 yards or more. If both these guys, if Cook goes under his line, probably means Burden is also going under his line. So it's kind of like you're playing for the stack here. It's basically like a hit or miss. Either both these guys are probably going to hit or neither one of them are going to hit. But again, in this type of matchup, in a game that projects to be competitive, a top 25 matchup, I like this to be a spot where we do see Missouri, have to keep their foot on the gas pedal, which should mean more pass attempts for Brady Cook, more opportunities for Luther Burden to get receiving yards. Both these props, correlate that way. So that's the first two props that I like for Saturday's games. And then the next two props that I like are going to be fantasy score props. Now, if you're new to Prizepicks, if you don't know how fantasy score works, it's really simple. It's basically just like your typical fantasy football league. It's the same scoring chart that every fantasy football league uses. The only difference for Prizepicks is that it's full point PPR. So for every reception, you get 1 point. For some sites, it's only half a point. But for Prizepicks, you do get a full point per reception, and then everything else is self-explanatory. So the first fantasy score prop that I do like for Saturday is going to be Desmond Reed. We're going to take Desmond Reed for more than 17.5 fantasy score. So Desmond Reed has been great to start the season. You can look at what he's done in their first 2 games. Had a huge game in week 1 against, I think that was Kent State they played, or I honestly can't remember who it was that they played, but he had a huge game week 1, and then he had a huge game last week against Cincinnati, had 37.4 fantasy points, 19 carries for 148 yards, also had 6 catches for 106 yards and a receiving touchdown. And then week 1, he had 14 carries for 145 yards and a rushing touchdown, also had 3 catches for 11 yards. So Desmond Reed is a workhorse running back. You can just look at his volume so far this season. 14 carries week 1, 19 carries last week. He also gets work in the passing game too. Had 3 catches week 1, had 6 catches last week, had over 100 receiving yards last week. So we've got kind of a workhorse running back here that's been very efficient on the ground this season. Now he gets a pretty good matchup at home against West Virginia. This West Virginia-Pittsburgh game actually has one of the highest totals on the slate. Right now, this game has I believe a 67.5 total last time I checked. Let me see if I can find it. So yeah, West Virginia-Pittsburgh, 63.5 total. West Virginia favored by 2.5. But this game has one of the highest totals on the slate. There's expected to be a lot of points scored in this West Virginia-Pittsburgh game. And with Pittsburgh, with how their offense kind of runs through Desmond Reed, if we're going to see Pittsburgh put up, 30-plus points here, which I think they have a team total near 30 points, if they're going to put up 3-4 touchdowns, in this spot, there's a very good chance you're going to see at least one, if not multiple, of those offensive touchdowns going to Desmond Reed. And I was looking at DraftKings Sportsbook. I think for this week, Desmond Reed, he's like minus 200 for a touchdown. So he's heavily favored to score a touchdown here. And if you just look at his prop lines, I mean, he's got an 88.5 rush yards prop. I was looking for reception props and receiving yards props for Desmond Reed, but I couldn't find any. But we know Desmond Reed is going to be involved in the passing game. He had 3 catches week 1. He had 6 catches last week. Obviously, for Prizepicks, running backs that can catch passes, that just makes their fantasy score upside even higher because you get a point per reception. That's just going to add even more upside when not only can Desmond Reed get points on the ground as a runner, but he can also get points as a pass catcher. And we saw that last week. He had 6 catches, over 100 receiving yards. But I like betting on Desmond Reed here in a great game environment, in a game with a 60-plus total. I think this matchup against West Virginia is pretty good as well. West Virginia has kind of struggled on the run so far this season, or against the run. I want to say in week two last week against Penn State, or maybe that was week 1, I can't remember honestly. But against Penn State, I want to say Nicholas Allen ran for over 100 yards on West Virginia. I'm going to pull it up just to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure week 1 against week 2 last week against Penn State, week 1 against Penn State, they ran all over West Virginia. Nicholas Singleton, excuse me, I got his name wrong. Nicholas Singleton ran had 13 carries for 114 yards, averaged over 8 yards per carry. They were pretty bad on the ground so far this season. Like this matchup a lot for Desmond Reed, like this game environment as well. So I think this is a good spot to bet on Desmond Reed. And I was looking at some projections. If you look at Underdog's projections for fantasy score, Underdog, similar DFS site to Prizepicks, also has fantasy point projections. They have their line on Desmond Reed set at 19.35. And you got to remember, Underdog is a half-point PPR site, whereas Prizepicks is full-point PPR. So with Underdog's line being at 19.35 and it being a half-point PPR site, Prizepicks, they should probably have their line on Desmond Reed at 20.5 if we assume that Underdog's line is correct. Now, maybe Underdog's line's a bit aggressive, but given that their projection, given Prizepicks projections, we're getting a much softer line on Prizepicks here. So I do like that as our second prop for Saturday. Desmond Reed, going to take him for more than 17.5 fantasy score. And then the third and final prop that I like is another fantasy score, and we're going to go down to the Colorado State game. And I like Shedeur Sanders for more than 22.5 fantasy score. Now, as you can see, if you play these 4 props as a 4-pick power, it still pays out 10x. We're not losing any payout. We're not getting much of any payout shift here for the correlation stack of Cook and Burden. Now, if you were to add a Colorado receiver, so let's just say, for example, let's take Travis Hunter over fantasy score and pair that with Shedeur. Now we're losing a payout. So normally this would pay out 10x for going 5 out of 5. It only pays out 7x when you add a Colorado receiver. So that's why I didn't want to pair a Colorado receiver with Shedeur, because we're going to lose, you're going to get a payout deduction. Whereas if you just play Shedeur by himself, don't pair any receiver with him, you still get a 10x payout for this. So that's kind of why I like doing it like this instead of taking Shedeur with another receiver, because if you do that, you're going to get a payout shift. But we still get a full 10x payout here, even with a correlated stack of Cook and Burden. Obviously, Reed, separate play from a different game. Shedeur, separate play from a different game. But let's talk through this prop on Shedeur and why I like this one. So if you look at Shedeur's game log, week 1, he had a really good game. He had 34.5 fantasy points. I think he threw 4 touchdowns in week 1. Let me see. Yeah, he threw for 4 touchdowns against North Dakota State, 445 yards. Last week against Nebraska was much more of a struggle. Only threw for 244 yards last week. Only had 1 touchdown. Also got sacked a bunch. Had negative 30 rush yards. Now Shedeur, he is going to throw the ball a ton. This Colorado offense is very, very pass heavy, and they're expected to be without their top running back. I believe his name is Dallas Hayden. I don't know a ton about Colorado. I think it's Dallin Hayden or Dallas Hayden, something like that. Don't know a ton about Colorado, but they're expected to be without their top running back this week, so we're probably going to see them be even more pass heavy than normal. And you can just look at Shedeur's projections, and you can see the sports books are assuming he's going to be throwing the ball a lot this week. He has a 321.5 pass yards prop. I was looking on Underdog. Underdog has Shedeur's pass attempts line set at 40.5. So he's projected for almost 40 pass attempts this week. He's projected to throw for over 300 yards. Should have a very good chance at throwing multiple touchdowns, if not 3+ touchdowns here. And if we project Shedeur for, let's say, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, that's going to give him 24 fantasy points. Now, sure, he could lose fantasy points if he throws an interception, which he could do here. He could lose fantasy points if he gets sacked and gets negative rushing yards. Colorado's offensive line, it's definitely a struggle. That's been one of their weakest points, is their offensive line. But I think against Colorado State, another pretty bad team, another bad defense, Colorado's offensive line should be able to hold up here against Colorado State. And if you look at last season against Colorado State, Shedeur did have a really, really good game. Now, the game did go to double overtime, But Shedeur threw for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. He actually had 3 rushing yards, so he didn't lose any rushing yards last year against Colorado State. If there was ever a spot where Shedeur will be able to, maybe scramble a little bit, you look at his game log last season. Most games last season, he had negative rush yards just because he would get sacked so much, and in college, you do lose yards for sacks. Well, this does feel like a spot where Colorado's offensive line should be able to hold up against a pretty weak Colorado State team. Hopefully, Shedeur doesn't have negative rush yards here. But I'm definitely betting on him throwing for probably close to 300 yards this week. I think he's got a very good chance at throwing multiple touchdowns. This is another game that projects to be really high scoring. You look at the total in this Colorado State game, it's got a very high total, 58.5. Colorado's favored by 7. This just feels like the perfect kind of bounce back spot for Shedeur Sanders after he really struggled last week against Nebraska. Gets a much softer matchup this week. Now, this game is on the road, but, Colorado State, that's not really like a hostile environment or anything. So I'm not really worried about that here. I think it's a really good spot for Shedeur to kind of bounce back. I like Colorado's offense to be able to put up some points this week. And looking at Underdog's projections, comparing it to Prizepicks, right now on Underdog, they have their fantasy points line on Shedeur set at 26.65. So we're getting a line that's pretty much 4 points lower than what Underdog has. You're getting a much softer line here on Prizepicks. So if you're going to take Shedeur Sanders over fantasy points this week, you want to be doing it on Prizepicks where you're getting the line at 22.5 versus on Underdog where it's at 26.6. I feel like the line should kind of be in the middle there. I would say this projection should probably be like 24.5. I think Underdog's line is a little bit high. I think Prizepicks' line is a little bit low, but I do like the over on 22.5 fantasy score for Shedeur here. Again, just given his projections this week, 300 plus pass yards, favored for 2 touchdowns, should have a pretty good chance of going over this fantasy score line if he throws for 300 yards and multiple touchdowns, which again, he's favored to do. So like that is our 4th and final play for Saturday's college football games. We're going to take Shedeur Sanders for more than 22.5 fantasy scores. So this is what I'm liking, guys, for Saturday's college football slate. Doing a correlated stack of Brady Cook and Luther Burden, taking Cook for more than 265.5 pass yards, pairing that with Luther Burden, more than 72.5 receiving yards. And then I like Desmond Reed for more than 17.5 fantasy score, and I like Shedeur Sanders for more than 22.5 fantasy score. So it's what I like, guys, for Saturday's college football slate. Hopefully we can bounce back this week. Week 2 was not a good week for me. It was a disaster, but I'm liking to bounce back this week. Feel good about these plays for Saturday, and let's try and hit these plays and make some money on this slate. So as always, guys, if you do enjoy these college football prospects videos, if they help you out, make sure to hit that like button down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. And again, if you guys don't have an account over on Prizepicks, be sure to sign up. Use promo code NOAH. When you sign up for Prizepicks, use my promo code, place your first $5 lineup. You get $50 in promo funds instantly added to your account. So check out Prizepicks if you have not yet. But good luck this week, guys. Thanks for watching as always. We'll see you in the next video.